welcome to Starr Mazer TV. Thank you for joining us on Starr Mazer TV. Yeah,
Yes,
nice seeing you again as well. The last time we talked very little about game development. As I was trying to explain to the stream, game developers don't spend 100% of their outside of their office lives talking only about game development. It's only 99%. So,
I believe there was lots of alcohol involved too.
yeah, we talked about families and kids and vacations and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
You guys have families?
No, well, we have. I mean, we have families. We have parents.
I mean, no kids.
no kids.
No, not yet.
No. Let's start. What is a point-and-click adventure game? And the reason I ask this is because there's a recent trend of calling games point-and-click adventure games that aren't point-and-click adventure games. I'll give you a couple of examples. Most of the Telltale games, which are good games, are not point-and-click adventure games. They're like visual novels or whatever, in my opinion. And then I guess I'll follow that with the newest King's Quest game, which there's no actual pointing or clicking, and it seems to just be like an on-rail storytelling game where they present 5 options, only one of whichever works, and you have to like listen to them talk a lot until you click the right option, and then that's not to me what a point-and-click adventure game is. So I would like to hear what you define for us the point-and-click adventure game genre.
I don't really have a definition because I don't like to pigeonhole what we do.
Sure.
And there's this sense of like, again, oh, sorry, some random window popped up. Go away. There's this. I got a lot of questions about, how do you make a marketable point-and-click adventure game, or how do you sell a point-and-click adventure game? And there's this horrible tendency to kind of lump them all together,
Sure.
and put them all in one box and say point-and-click adventure games are this, as if to say all platformers are this, or all,
Right.
RPGs are this. And I don't really have a definition. It's really just whatever I want to make or play, and that's what I do.
Okay.
Do you feel like people have boxed you into a point and click adventure space that you might not actually occupy?
I think that it's not that I feel boxed into a space. I think that a lot of point and click adventure games are boxed into one space. Like several games came out this year and last year, and if a really high profile adventure game is reviewed very badly, suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I knew I didn't like point and click adventure games. It's like this
Sure.
one game wasn't so great, suddenly they're all bad. Or one game does really well, or is really high profile, or has a lot of tension, that works out well for everyone else making point and click adventure games, because suddenly
Right.
people want to talk about them again. So there's this sense of them all being kind of lumped together.
We had an interesting turn of that. There's a point in our trailer. This is from a 38-second trailer. There's a point where a character swings from a rope. He swings on a rope from a floating ship onto a platform, and apparently it was animated well enough that somebody thought. Did you see me push the cat off the table? She's annoying, this cat. She's knocked over the thing. It's crazy.
She likes to unplug our cameras.
Yeah, she unplugs her cameras. She's a beautiful cat. Her name is Scuzzy. It stands for Small Cat-like Systems Interface. Anyway, we had a point in our trailer where a guy, the main character, swings on a rope. In a classic point-and-click adventure game, there's a lot of custom animation stuff. Like if you click on a thing, the one time in the game, your character might pull out a gun or like do a custom animation. It's just a custom animation in the game, but people watching the trailer had immediately been like, "Oh, it's also a platform game," and it was this weird, like, they couldn't get past the idea that there were these 2 genres, and then there's a 3rd genre because a guy did something similar to another genre. So they're trying to like do exactly what you're saying. They're trying to pigeonhole it, or like pick elements from it and say, but that's really like one of these type of games. And I think early on I would just say, oh man, I'm just making a game. It's influenced by this, it's influenced by that, but I'm mostly making a game. But I found it really hard to traverse, like, to get past this, like, to have a deeper conversation about what our game is doing. I've almost had to cheat. I've almost had to say, it's a point-and-click adventure game and a horizontal scrolling shoot-'em-up game. Now that that's done, let's talk about what it really is. And it's been this like weird cheat that I've had to employ.
It's like you always see it's X meets Y, or it's, I don't know, Pong meets Cubert, or something like that.
So I guess our narrative so far is that a point-and-click adventure game is what we call a point-and-click adventure game. Effectively, like if you take something like the Space Quest series and you compare it to something like Phantasmagoria, they don't feel the same. but they're both point and click adventure games. So
I
for
always
our
hated that name. It's just something about the term calling a game a point and click game. I mean, that is
right
what you do with
in
any
games,
Windows
yeah,
application.
yeah,
It sounds so boring. It's an
right,
adventure game. It's a story-based game. It's a
sure,
narrative-based game. It's a role-playing game. It's a
And that
right,
makes
I
more
don't.
sense to
I make
me
it's a
because
game. That's. I mean, it's convenient shorthand to say it's a point and click adventure game because then you know what it is.
yeah,
But God, I hate that name. It sounds so
yeah.
boring.
It's like it's planar 2D animated storytelling game with mouse interface,
Something like that. Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, no, okay.
Make
So
an acronym out of that and we're good.
yeah.
I don't remember what you
But
said afterwards.
let's not. So we've established then that they're just games, but you and I are making games that are similar to each other in some ways. Like I just said, a planar animated 2D or 3D storytelling game with a focus more on puzzle solving, traversing a story or an environment, that kind of thing. And they're using inventory and there's this sort of traditional sort of rigging that what people generally call point and click adventure games have,
Yeah.
and we've tried to connect to that in our games. I want to know what your take. So we've just established, sure, that there's point and click adventure game. That's a pigeonholing term, and maybe we shouldn't even use that. And point and click adventure game as a term is silly, but there's a thing you're doing that people can identify as not being Call of Duty. And not being, Dead Space or Murder, Death, Kill or any of these things.
Murder, Death, Kill.
Remember that game? That's a great game, MDK. Do you remember
There's a
MDK
game
at
called
all?
Murder, Death, Kill?
Yeah, MDK and MDK 2. You were the guy with the sniper helmet, like this big long conical helmet that was like a sniping little dog. Look up MDK. It's MDK. It's incredible. It's an incredible series of games.
Murder,
It's like one of the best.
Kill game. Oh my
Yeah.
God, there is a game called Murder.
I didn't make that up. You thought I made up MDK? That's ridiculous. I mean, I wish I'd made up MDK. I'd be like one of the best developers ever. But it's a really cool game series. But it's not Syndicate, even though Syndicate has like an isometric 2D animated with environments, with inventory, with character development, all that. It's not Syndicate. You and I aren't making Syndicate, right? So, what is it that defines the type of game you're making, and how is it different from what people expect from games today? And how do you keep it relevant? So that's like that's all one. It sounds like three questions, but it's one question. How do you design something that was very popular for a period of time, went out of style for a little bit, and is now resurging because we all played it when we were younger, and now we all have money and can buy games. Like that's because that's really the arc. Yeah. So go answer the question. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep answering it in 15 different ways. I think if you just let me go.
Back in the 80s when I was playing King's Quest 3, I would spend like a month or maybe more than that getting killed by that stupid wizard over and over and over
Sure.
again. And I was happy to do it. I was having
Yeah.
fun. Now I'd last maybe 5 minutes before going to Google. And my philosophy now is that if you have to leave my game to enjoy it, then I've kind of failed. Like being stuck isn't really fun.
Right.
We have nostalgic memories of being stuck in adventure games, but only because really there was no other option.
Right.
You think, oh, like I spent all this time solving these puzzles. People today are just so spoiled and coddled. If a game, I had a game once that shipped with the hint book. I think it was one of the Gateway games by Legend.
Sure.
I think it was the second one shipped with the hint book. I consulted it every 5 seconds. I mean, I had no resistance at all. It was basically like having Google today. And it's just, we were no different. Being stuck is not fun. And I think that the design philosophies have changed from being puzzle focused to being more like exploration focused. Like you're exploring the world, you're exploring characters and things like that. The actual experience is more immersive and more enjoyable to play. Like you're in a character's shoes, the events are happening to you or you're making them happen, versus having to solve obscure moonlogic puzzles to progress the story. You're actually experiencing a story, making it feel more natural. And that's what I always try to do when I design, is try to how to make this feel more natural and grounded and like something that could actually happen and something that you would enjoy.
Yeah, that sounds very much like our philosophy of how we've been trying to approach our kind of adventure game. A lot of people are like, are you going to have it be that there's this really random thing that occurs and you have to scare the snake to get the thing to make this thing happen? And it's very much like, no, we're trying to design every puzzle so it aids the plot or it aids the character or...
Yeah, we have three rules in our design, which is how does it advance the story? No matter what's happening, how does it advance the story? How does it change the environment that you're in? And how does it change the character, the main character? Those are the three major pillars. If something that we write doesn't do that, we need to get rid of it. It's not.
Yeah, puzzles as well. If it's,
Oh yeah, totally.
If it's just meaningless busy work and it doesn't influence the story or in any way doesn't develop the characters or the world or anything, then cut it. I
Yeah.
have cut so much crap from our games for that reason. I'm like, why am I doing this? This isn't fun, and
Right.
don't get rid of it. So I am the best publisher ever.
Ruin everything. Nope, it sucked. No.
Yeah, I mean it's gotta be hard to stay relevant in that environment, and it sounds like you've been able to adapt in a way that maybe other people weren't ready to. I don't know what the people behind Space Quest are doing now, aside from, were they even involved in the newest King's Quest? But it
You
felt
mean like that old Sierra team? Because that's a totally different company now. I mean, that's not they're not the
Yeah.
same people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just can imagine this point where people are like, well, people don't want to be, as you said, stuck for a year or 2 years. So,
I
you know.
think you do, but you.
Yeah, no, there's an interesting nostalgia that you get from looking back on those days. We're playing through all the Space Quest series on Starr Mazer Plays just to remember what point and click adventure games were and how they sucked a lot sometimes and how they were really incredible some other times. We played through Space Quest 2 together and on the show, and it took 3 or 4 hours to get deep into that game. And at one point we realized that we'd saved over a save that we needed in case we fucked up the game, and we were ruined and had to play the whole game over again. So 11 minutes later,
30
we
seconds
were
of the game.
11 minutes later we were back to where we were because the game itself is like a 12-minute game. If you know exactly what to do. Space Quest 2 takes about 12 minutes to get through.
Really?
Yeah, 12.
If you know
10
exactly
plus 2 more.
where
Yeah.
you're going. Maybe 20 with all the...
If you're
ending.
waiting through stuff or watching the cutscenes, but we skipped through all the stuff.
Half of those minutes going through that electric vine puzzle.
Oh my gosh.
If you turn down the
if you go
the
to
speed,
slow.
to slow the whole thing down and just cheat it.
Yeah, we just changed the speed.
But yeah, no, the trick was that they made solving those puzzles that was the value giver for the game. That was what gave the game value, was that you could spend 4 hours trying to figure out how to get this one thing to do the one thing. If you know how to get that one thing to do the one thing, if you don't turn off the buzzing sound when the ship crashes at the beginning, you're going to be hounded by bad guys the entire time. But you have to type a very specific command to understand that there's a button next to the thing making the noise. And once you figure that out, you then have to press the button. If you don't, then bad guys will be chasing you the entire time and killing you all over the place. Whereas if you do hit the button, it happens once more. They just by luck kind of fly by.
Again behind the couch.
So I guess one of the points of resistance that we ran into when starting the campaign for Starr Mazer, and then even following up after the campaign, is I've been told a number of times, oh man, you're taking a giant risk. And I thought to myself, no, I'm making a game. That alone is a giant risk, of course, but I'm not taking any more of a risk than anyone else. And I keep getting this weird idea that, excuse me, I drank too quickly, that I'm slamming together two genres that nobody likes, which I don't agree with. Number one, I mean that's not a thing. Also, we're not
say adventure games. Okay,
right.
Keep going, Dave.
We're not slamming two genres together for one. We say it's a point-and-click adventure shmup, but it's really a cool actiony story game that has elements of pointing and clicking and elements of shooting, flying and shooting.
I just played this. I've been going on this moody platformer kick, and I played a game called The Fall.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like a moody platformer.
Yeah.
But it is basically a point and click adventure game. It's not
Yeah.
advertised like one, but it basically is one.
Sure.
I thought was very interesting.
Yeah. So, and they're advertising it as like an action platformer. I remember. I think we saw that at Indiecade at the Nindies.
It's very, very good too. It's,
Yeah. It looked like a really cool game, but at no point where, I mean, it's like they're 10-foot pole between them and the idea that it's a point and click game. How is it that like what has caused the point and click adventure game to lose favor, and how is it you can stay relevant by making them outside of the fact that there is sort of like this hipsterish like early 20s like I like point and click games because they're not popular with the
Don doesn't like
Call of
hipsters.
Duty crowd or whatever.
I just find that funny because it's like they were like barely born when these games came out.
No, that's what I'm pointing. Like, I'm gonna diverge for a second. I just watched yesterday a Summer Games Done Quick thing. You know, the Summer Games Done Quick thing is happening. They were speed running Mega Man 4, and not one of them was over 21 years old. And they were speed running Mega Man 4, and they're talking about it like it's fucking like the most impressive, like powerful thing, and they know every little thing. Like, you really got to watch out those guys, and they made up names for the.
Actually, that's pretty cool.
It's cool, but what's really weird is the lack of perspective as like a whole person that you're getting in those moments. One of the guys kept saying, "This is the most incredible speed run of Mega Man 4 I've ever seen in my entire life." He was like 20. So, first off, you weren't around for like the last 30 years that Mega Man 4 has been around, and you haven't seen that much just like in life. So, it's not super impressive that you just saw a guy really quickly beat Mega Man 4.
Usually that's because you played a lot of video games.
But I just thought it was really weird that there's this ownership and there's this sort of which is good. I want everybody to feel like you could. Sorry, we have a bus passing. Everyone deserves games. Everyone deserves to play games. Everyone deserves to feel ownership and interaction with these games. But there's this sort of, and I'm not saying Summer Games Done Quick is like this in any way. I was just using that as like a point of interest that I saw. But there's this sort of weird counterculture thing where people only like obscure games that nobody's ever heard of. And if you've heard of it, then it's probably I probably don't like it anymore. That kind of weird edgy thing where there's this. And point and click adventures I found in trying to curry favor with audiences with this game we're making, I've hit this sort of like oh yeah, I'm 22 and I love point and click adventure. I love Phantasmagoria. And it's like, dude, you recognize that like Phantasmagoria 1 was, as far as engineering goes, like a mess. It was a cool game. I love it. Phantasmagoria 2 upped it, but there was a period of time when we like didn't know how to do certain things.
No different than things like Torment or like there's such nostalgic for Planescape Torment, or even Arcanum or Vampire Bloodlines, but all those games bombed.
They bombed horribly. Totally, yeah.
And yet now we love them. Like all those developers go to Kickstarter and they're getting millions of dollars to
right
now.
But they're getting millions of dollars from people who weren't there supporting them when the game could have just had a career making games, if their game sold.
I mean, the thing is, I don't know. Yeah, back when they came out, the market was just very different. I know that there's this wonderful article that was on Rock Paper Shotgun recently about point and click adventure games, and it kind of epitomized my feeling about a lot of modern point and click adventure games. Most of them do wrong, and what's been bugging me about a lot of modern games is that, like, back in the 90s, you got a lot of, of course you had LucasArts and Sierra, and you had a lot of other developers kind of trying to cash in on their popularity and aping what they did. And inevitably, they mostly failed. You got a lot of really bad games. You got like Innocent Until Caught. You got like Bud Tucker. You got games that just didn't do well commercially or critically or whatever. And now all of these new developers are coming out saying, I want to make a game like LucasArts or Sierra. They're doing the exact same thing. And it didn't work in the 90s.
Sure.
It's not going to work now.
Right. Exactly.
I hate when people say, oh, yeah, you remind me of LucasArts and Sierra, or, like you bring back the old days, or I hate that. I just don't think of myself as someone who's making old stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
it's old because of the pixel art, I admit, but I try to make things as modern as I can. Like
excellent.
nowhere on my website will you see the term like golden age or the 90s or retro or
Right.
bringing them back or whatever, because I just don't believe in that. I think you are an artist, you're a creator, you're existing now, you're making something now for an
Yep.
audience that exists now. It's a game of today, and you shouldn't treat it like something old because it's not.
So our approach has been, if you go to imigosoftworks.com, you'll see that our logo, I'm sorry, our tagline is nostalgia in HD. The reason we say that is, I don't want to make, just like you're saying, we're playing. The reason we're playing these old games is mostly because this one hasn't really played many of them. She's more of a console gamer historically. I played all of them, and the reason I'm making a game currently that's a point-and-click adventure game with a whole bunch of action is because those were fucking boring when I was 13. Like, it got to the point where, like, trying to figure out that I have to scare the snake was not entertaining. So I'd go to my Turbo Duo and I'd boot up Gate of Thunder and play like this really cool actiony thing until the fact that that had no story got really boring to me, and I'd go back to the thing with a story. And there's an idea, this nostalgic. Pardon?
No context for what you're doing.
Exactly. So there's this nostalgic idea that like the things I did were really great when I did them when I was 12, and the fact is they weren't really great. And as you pointed out, some of them weren't really great even for their time. And what we're trying to make in Starr Mazer is, and this has been our tenet across every design decision in the game, not what did Sierra do, but what did my like 9-year-old self think Sierra did. Like,
Well,
what did I remember that Sierra did?
it's funny you
now?
say your slogan is nostalgia in HD. My wife always says that we should change our slogan to we make games the way you remember them, not the way they were.
This is exactly what we're talking about. This is exactly what we want to
That's
do.
why I don't like playing. I don't like replaying those old games because I have an
Yeah.
image in my head of
Yeah.
what my experience was. There's what
Right.
that thing I'm nostalgic for. There's that thing I remember enjoying. That's the game I'm making.
Right.
The game that's
And
in my head that I want to play.
we're doing the same thing, so I'm really happy that we both hit that same point. I thought we were actually going to come and like argue about stuff, but it seems like we're just like super doing the same thing. There was in Space Quest 3, you go to this place called Mammoth Burger, and in my mind, I hadn't played it since I was, I don't know, whatever, 12. And we played it on the stream, and I saw Mammoth Burger. I saw the logo, and I was so excited because that was one of the best moments in gaming in my little like brain when I was a kid, and it just kind of snowballed over the years into this like, oh, those days, why don't they make games like that anymore? Remember Mammoth Burger? Remember how incredibly cool it was? Remember talking to the guy and ordering the food and having all this cool adventures? And you do exactly one thing in Mammoth Burger. It takes 0 time. You play Astro Chicken, then you leave. That's it. You can order food, but there's really no point.
There
You
was
get
this
to the
sense
corner ring.
of the universe being really, really big.
Yeah, much
So
bigger
that-
than it really was.
Yeah. That's kind of what I remember.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no worries. So I think we both had the same answer then to the question I was asking you, which was how do we attack the problem of making an old school game in today's modern design methodology? We don't attack that. That's not a problem we plan to attack. We just make a game. We make a good game.
Well, what's funny is that, sort of tying into something I said before, how adventure games tend to be lumped into one box. Because there's
Yeah.
always, like, 90% of the reviews of my games always start with some treatise on how adventure games are old and dying, or now
Right.
they're coming back, or what have you. Something about the history of adventure games. Back in the day, LucasArts made adventure games. I'm like,
Yeah.
this isn't a LucasArts adventure game. But there's this narrative of they were dying, now they're coming back, or maybe they're dying again, or now they're coming back again, doesn't seem to apply to other old school genres. I mean, you've got roguelikes, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And those are huge now, but no one
Right.
ever talks about how roguelikes were dying and now they're back. No one talks about, quirky platformers being dead and now they're back, or like shmups, for example,
Right.
or even like those like top-down old school JRPGs. Like those
Yeah.
are really popular now, but you never hear that story of they were dead, no one played them, but now they're coming back. But adventure games, like, yeah, it seems that we're obsessed with this narrative of that they were.
Do you think maybe it's because Adventure games. Oh, so that Sierra logo, right? The triangular thing with the circle with the slashes through it. That I don't remember. I remember id's logo and the Sierra logo and LucasArts logos. Those are like the logos I remember as a kid. I think I remember Broderbund's logo, like Broderbund Software.
Oh, yeah.
But that's about it. There was a moment in history, just gaming history, where there were two studios distinctly. Everybody, are you a LucasArts fan or a Sierra fan? Like that's a big moment. I think it's because those two companies represented a genre for a while. That's all they did. What did Sierra do other than that? LucasArts, of course, did Star Wars stuff. We ignored that. They made point-and-click adventure games, and so did Sierra. And then LucasArts was like, nope, we're not doing that anymore, and Sierra disappeared. It bombed. So do you think maybe those two creators are what everyone's always looking at? Not the genre, but the two biggest fighters in that genre, the two biggest gorillas in the room, like kind of dying?
I don't know. It's I'm trying to think of any like major company from back in the day that you'd be nostalgic for. I mean, I keep thinking
Apogee Software.
Apogee, Ultima. I don't know. Like I still think of the BioWare logo and the Black Isle logo from the 90s.
Yeah. The Black Isle logo from the 90s is great. I feel that one.
I remember there was like I think it was on GOG. There was like some unknown Black Isle game, and that never really did well, and that they were selling it on GOG. I'm like, oh my god, I gotta play this game. So I bought it on GOG, and I saw the logo, and I'm like, oh my god, that logo. Then I played the game, and it's what it's called, but it's like something of the lion. I don't know something.
Sure. There's a reason you didn't hear about it before. Yeah.
Now I gotta look this game.
You're looking it up? Cool. So let's talk about what makes a puzzle in an adventure game good. Before we get too far, I'm going to close this window. Let's get to puzzles.
I love it.
What makes a puzzle valuable in a point-and-click adventure game to you?
I don't know. I mean, it's sort of one of these things that I will agonize over.
Right.
Ever. And then I end up the result, you wouldn't believe that I spent like weeks of tearing my hair out over it, because I always end up going for the most simplest thing, and it's usually the best. I think, I mean, any narrative-based game needs some kind of like pace setter where it allows you to digest what's going on and kind of prevents you from progressing a little bit, sort of like little bottlenecks to help you process the story. And puzzles kind of do that, but like I said earlier, they can slow things down, but they can also grind things to a halt. Mm-hmm. And I think that my philosophy towards puzzles is different now. I don't focus on puzzles so much as interactivity, like having the game world be more responsive and just more interesting to explore and be in. Like I always use the example of you can talk to someone and learn all about them through dialogue, or you could rob their house. And just by exploring, going through their file cabinets and looking at their pictures, you can gain that same information. And you remember it because it's something you physically did. And that carries a lot more meaning and a lot more weight than just passively kind of absorbing information through dialogue. I mean, everyone talks about Monkey Island, and they talk about insult sword fighting, and they talk about the chicken with the pulley, because they were things that you actually did. There were choices you made, things you actually did. It wasn't just a line someone told you. It was something you physically did, and those are the things that you remember, the things that you physically do in a game. So that's kind of what puzzles are to me. They're kind of like what gives context to what you're doing. If that makes any sense. It's a little less.
No, yeah, totally. So, on that note, I'm going to parlay that into a question about story. Do you consider your games primarily tools for telling stories?
Yes.
Okay, so in that way, a puzzle is a way to a more novel way to deliver exposition of your story than just having some guy tell you everything.
Yes.
Cool. So it's a way to cause the player to more readily consume and retain the story that you've presented. That's kind
I
of what we're
think
saying.
so. Yeah, that sounds a lot smarter than what I said. So let's go.
Right. What we're doing in our game, and it seems a little bit. Oh, I'll ask a question first to see if what I'm about to say is actually real. Do you have when you start your, let's say you're going to start a brand new game, do you have an idea, like not only a gameplay concept but a story concept locked? Do you know the beginning and middle and end of your story when you start your game development process, and does that end of your story drive the development of your game?
Hmm. Um, I try to. I always try to have an end. I kind of have a goal, but no real map on how to get there.
Sure.
Um, I think I know that I kind of know what the feeling I want to go for the end of the game. As I'm designing it, I don't necessarily know what the end is. I prefer not to actually start production on the game until I have that ending.
Yeah.
Um, it's it's hard. I mean, it tends. Some games I've written, I've changed the ending 3 or 4 times before I was happy with it.
Sure.
Deception, I did change 3 or 4 times before.
All right.
I don't know if you've played the Blackpool games, but I changed the ending of the fourth game a lot. I knew where the whole series was going. How it got there kind of changed a lot over
Okay.
the course of designing it. And,
So over the course of development, you kind of it evolved its path, and you kind of. So I'm gonna let's step away from like servicing an audience right now, and being very general and talking about great. And let's talk specifically as developer to developer. We're doing something that is not like that in our storytelling mechanism. We have a general idea of our moral, the moral of our story, which is discovering what it means to be a hero, right? Because our main character, you've seen him, Brick M. Stonewood. He's a cookie cutter 1980s hero. He's blonde. He's got a cigarette. He's got a smoking hot vehicle. He's got a nice jutty chin. He's what you expect heroes to be. Yeah, that's like a thing, right? I grew up watching those. Like Lion-O has a jutty chin. Prince Adam / He-Man, jutty chin. They all have this big thing. They're all like effectively blonde. So we present a world where that's the obvious hero. Obviously, he's the hero. Look at him. But over the course of the game, you find that his idea of heroism is probably super wrong, and that heroism is actually far more complicated, and he might have to give up a lot of his preconceived ideas of heroism to either become a hero or watch someone else become a hero. But we are not presenting a world in which there's one way to do that. We're presenting a world in which the potential is, it's not limitless, it's totally limited because we only have a limited amount of time, money, and team members. But we have an engine that we've
I
built.
have no idea what that's like.
No, right?
Sorry, I definitely.
We've built an engine. We've built an engine wherein our story will evolve with the player's intention, and we dynamically stack our narrative based on what is the most prevalent actions of our player. So we're writing a story that doesn't have an ending. It has potential endings, but there isn't the large form. At the end, Brick will stand on top of the whatever and say, "Here's the moral of the story." Like, in fact, some of our endings are really shitty on purpose. We didn't craft them to be, but there are potential endings that are like, yeah, you were a complete dick the entire time, and then somebody went off and saved the universe while you fucked around, and it's the worst.
So there's
and
multiple endings.
Yeah.
It's not even that there's so. A little bit of insider baseball. We built a series of episodes. The gameplay session, playthrough is comprised of episodes. These episodes aren't distinct to the player. They're not presented as episodes. They're not like, welcome to episode 3. They're just story modules that can overlap to some degree, that are kind of running, right? And they're watching you while they're running. They're like, okay, well, you did this 3. Well, let's cut off this angle. You can't go over here now, but you can go over here now. And the available episodes that we can jut in have now shifted, and some of them you'll never get to because you made a bunch of choices that will never let you get over here. But maybe if you make more choices down the line, that will become viable again and pop in. We have a pile of those, and some of them are candidate beginnings, and some of them are candidate endings. So something could be, let's say, halfway through the story, you encounter a bad guy who wants to blow up the station. I use this example a lot, so I have no problem using it now. You encounter a bad guy who wants to destroy the station, but you've done enough so that you can like suss out that plan and stop that guy. It's just now a fun little adventure that you went through while working on a larger story. But if that guy, because of circumstances, pops in halfway through the gameplay, your playthrough, he might be weighted, have more now be the antagonist, whose job is to blow up the entire station, and all of your ideas are kind of, everyone's dialogue kind of shifts toward, it's not important to go check out what's going on in the Baratha Divide. Our station could get blown up, and then you spend the focus of the story shifts to that guy because we've decided his story is a candidate ending, and we say, okay, cool. Now let's have a bunch of extra content that will play in that episode. If we've reached the point where we should be ending the game in a couple hours, and you've done enough stuff to cause this to be triggered as a candidate ending, so that episode could be like a 20-minute interlude in the middle of the gameplay, or it could be the reason you played the game until then. And we're constantly, all of our dialogues constantly try to respect the potentiality that they're stacked with something else. So that's a different style of storytelling entirely from beginning, middle, and end storytelling. Do you think, and this isn't to be like your version versus our version fight, but do you think one of them, as a young developer trying to do this for the first time alone, this is my first studio and my first game as somebody who's not working for somebody else. Do you think this is a viable thing that sounds compelling, or do you think it would be fuck the pooch? It is complicated. It
sounds like a lot of content, because if you're tailoring, you have to write a lot of extra dialogue to kind of, react to all the different choices and ways of things, and
we're cheating a little. Like a lot of our responses are general enough to be contextually relevant, right?
So my only answer could be, if it works, it works. There's no real answer. I mean, I do say that when I was just starting out, and of course there was no Kickstarter back then, I deliberately kept everything really small. Because I knew I didn't really have the resources to make anything bigger. I made my first game in a month and started selling it. I just wanted to gain experience making and selling a game.
Sure.
And I knew I would make mistakes, and I was able to bounce back because I hadn't spent a lot of time and money on it.
Right.
That was just what I did. I was just, and of course I had like no money to speak of back then, so I had very little resources. I mean, now with Kickstarter and stuff, that's different. But I mean, I just think like, wow, that sounds like a lot of work.
It is.
When I hear that, I'm like, that's a lot of work and a lot of content you're creating that people probably are going to see. Which, if you're cool with that, then
one of the major points that we were attempting to hit is a point where you would finish the game and really want to play again. The last time I played Space Quest 6 was when I was 14, and there's a reason. There's zero reason to play that game again. I beat it. There's nothing else you can do in that game. The story was told. I liked it. It was cool or whatever, but why would I play it again? We're going to eventually play it again when I'm 36. Like, we'll have jumped through time because I'm 36 and old and don't remember anymore. But that's the only reason that we'll play it. I probably have all these weird ideas of what the game was, but for years afterward, I had no need to play it again. We wanted to make a game that has replayability as a major factor, and the idea is you get our playthrough, our average playthrough time. We're trying to clock at about 10 hours, and the game will start making decisions for you, not that you see, but it'll start cutting off paths or whatever to kind of get you to a satisfying ending, so that you can play again, and that's a major source of concern for us. The idea is, if we build the engine the way we've architected it, in like an update, a DLC or something, we can drop in a new piece of content which will recontextualize the entirety of the game, right? Because we've added a new episode that will throw variables and consume properties that otherwise had a certain flow. It'll just reflow it, because everything are these little stack simple systems that are modular, and they take like what's the snapshot of the game state right now? Cool. Well, I only respond to that. I don't respond to a distinct thing that you did or whatever. But have you pissed off the bartender? Cool. Pissed off the bartender means that in this conversation it'll be this way. But there are 60 different ways to piss off the bartender. And you know what I'm saying? So it's these little modular moments where we're crafting these little moments more than anything. And stacking them together. So replayability is really important. So the idea that a lot of this content will go unseen, we recognize that we've reduced it from 80% of the content being unseen.
Voice acting.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
We're recording actually 13 scenes
that
next
makes
week.
it even more complicated.
It is
know.
so fun.
I
Luckily,
know.
we come from a film background, and I have a film studio, and we've done a lot of recording and a lot of voice. That's to me an easy point, and the organization of it is, easier than I think if you were just a game developer and never interacted with it before. But it's daunting as hell. I mean, I'm looking at what is going to effectively be hundreds of thousands of lines over the course of, however long the life cycle of the game is, the longer tail of the game. Anytime we add a character or something, we have to go record all of it. For this one episode, our demo episode for PAX, which isn't even an alpha, it's literally like just to show that the thing can function at all, because we're in a modern era. It used to be you got, okay, here's your upfront, here's 6 months, 8 months, whatever it takes to do the game. Come back to us. Oh wow, you have a beta. We've tested the beta internally. You haven't showed anybody. We've given some fake screenshots to a magazine and whatever. Then you release a game and it's kind of buggy, but who cares? That's the fate of the game. We're not in that anymore. We're in the point where our Kickstarter backers, they want to see something today. And it's like, we started like 3 months ago. You're not going to see something today. Like, yeah. So for PAX, we absolutely need to deliver something. So our first demo episode was like, remember, episodes actually overlap each other and play together. So this is like a cut out specialized moment that you're just going to see at PAX. That alone has 13 individual scenes, all of which have mutable dialogue based on where the scenes stack up and how you play them, plus all of the voice recording that has to go along with it. So it's daunting. It's a ridiculous amount of work.
I mean, our games typically have I think Technobabylon was our largest game that had about 13,000 lines.
Yeah.
Characters. And that took a long time. And we rented a studio. I mean, we
Yeah.
worked solidly for like 2 months to record it all.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. Like, if you want to add more, you got to bring them back. And
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they're actors, so they have to like get back into it and like figure it out. And,
unless you work with remote actors, which I generally don't. I prefer working directly because I'm in New York and I can do that. So I prefer doing it that way just because you get more from the face-to-face direction than you would.
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah, I mean, I can't tell you whether it's viable or not. It just sounds like a hell of a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
For your
I
first
would love to know kind of like how your teams typically work. So it sounds like you write the story and then start production, start hiring people, and get going on it. Are your dialogue, do you usually do like dialogue branches, or like, I just love to know a little bit more about how your games function.
I don't do much branching, at least not yet. For my next game, I want to do more branching. If only because we're very small, we have limited budgets. I'm very aware that we're doing a very niche thing, so I have to be very careful with the time and money and effort that I spend on stuff. Also, I always have this issue with multiple endings because there's like, whenever there's multiple endings, there's always the ending that the writer really intended.
The good ending.
Well, there's
Right.
here's the one. Here's the ending that's actually in their head,
Yeah.
and then there's the other ones that are there just because. And if you're going to have alternate endings, they have to be true to whatever message you're trying to convey. And sometimes that's hard. Like if you spend the game as an asshole, and you end the game, being an asshole, and no one likes you, it's not very satisfying. You kind of come away from it feeling like, well, that wasn't very fun. Even though you might have had fun being an asshole the whole game, the end of it won't be fun because, it's not a very satisfying ending. So making all the endings satisfying and true to the whole experience is very challenging. And actually, I've done enough of these that now I'm kind of going to try to do that with the next game we do. I've actually teamed a former BioWare writer, which is kind of neat. So we're working on.
That is awesome. That sounds incredible.
Our team currently is myself as a writer. I am an award-winning screenwriter, I also have another award-winning screenwriter and a writer from an ex-Telltale guy. So we've got lots of writing happening constantly.
Hmm.
Too much writing.
Too much writing.
So much writing that our art team is like, whoa, 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 whoa. So we need 900,000 assets for this one episode? That's not a thing. Cool. We have a question from R. Harp. Dave, what inspires your stories? Real life, other games, or random thoughts?
Kadri, thank you, Fuzzy Ski. Thank you, Fuzzy Ski.
Yeah.
Uh,
Fuzzy, he's a gentleman named Adam. He's an incredible fan of ours. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Do I base my stories on real life?
Like, what inspires you?
Yeah, pretty much life living in New York. I don't think I knew it at the time, but when I started Blackwell, it was very much a story of urban isolation. I had just recently moved to the city. I'd been here for 5 years, and it was sort of ways to kind of give voice to things that was things that were going on in my life, feelings that I had, give kind of embody them in various characters and kind of give voice to all of these things. And very much a story of urban isolation and things I was going through. Uh, at least that's how they always started. Things kind of evolved and changed from there. So maybe my thoughts going into these stories aren't entirely clear, but they were there when I started making them.
So it seems like you base a lot of the core of your stories on your personal
Very much.
experiences.
Very
Yeah,
much.
that's very cool. Meansver says, I've heard you decided to put off learning Unity and stick with AGS. Could you elaborate on that decision?
Yes, I can. I played around with Unity. I took a class. Um, the thing is, I've learned that having an engine that knows exactly what you're making is a tremendous boon. AGS knows exactly what you're trying to make. You create a character, it knows what a character is. A character walks, it talks, it has animations applied to it, it has inventory, that kind of thing, and does all of that for you. Something like Unity, you have to define all that stuff. You have
Yeah.
to everything in the engine is just some everything is just some random game object. You have to apply the properties of a character to that object and then treat it like a character. And that's a little over my head, especially since the next project that we want to do is probably our most ambitious. And learning a whole new engine on top of that has just kind of melted my brain a bit. So I'm probably going to stick with AGS, or I've been talking with James Dearden, the guy who made Techno Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
He's been playing around with Unity and actually took some of our artists' artwork and did some kind of clever things with it in Unity. And I might hire him to program the game if, uh, depending on our finances and how things are. Hey, Kitty, when the time comes. So that is mostly why was put off learning Unity, simply because I just it was taking me 2 weeks to do something that took me an hour to learn in AGS
Sure.
15 years ago, and it was so frustrating. And I know I could learn it. I know it's possible. I just have my brain is so focused on designing. Basically, I decided I wanted to work on being a better designer and better writer than being a better programmer.
Sure.
Sticking with AGS would enable me to do that. Hiring a programmer to help me program the game would also help me do that. I have to decide what I want to do.
Meansver says, your new project sounds cool. Any exclusive info?
Sure. Basically, I haven't really been keeping this a secret, although I haven't really been so blatant about it. Years ago, there was a writer from BioWare named Jennifer Hepler who gave this statement how she wanted to skip the combat in BioWare games. And she got a lot of flack for that, which I thought was very undeserved. But it sort of got me thinking, well, that's basically a point and click adventure game. And
It is.
which with like the branching story and the branching narrative and having companion characters to pal around with, instead of like when you build up a party in a BioWare game, they help you with combat tactics. But I'm thinking like in an adventure game, they would kind of help you with solving puzzles depending on what they can do. And that is a game I've been wanting to make for a very long time. And And it turned out I actually, this is the funny thing, I actually went to summer camp with Jennifer Hepler. I didn't know this at the time because she changed her name. She got married. I later ran into her. It was a very funny, it was a very funny coincidence. So we laughed, which is why I mentioned I hooked up with a Bioware writer. It's her. So she's helping me design that. So I figure, A, I want to do a Bioware style game. Inspired me to make that game. So she was the first one I called. She said yes. So we're working on the design right now. So
That's incredible.
it's been a lot of fun. But in terms of the genre, I'm going back to urban fantasy. I kind of wanted to do. Uh, I think the thing that kind of always held me back with Blackwell is that I had some very strict rules, and I couldn't really go beyond them. And also, I
Like game world rules or story rules?
yeah, kind of game world rules. Like ghosts could only do X. They
Sure.
couldn't
Right.
go beyond that. If I wanted to have something cool happen, I had to really justify it and kind of stretch the rules a bit and uh, that kind of thing. They mostly were very middle class urban fantasies. You got a lot of offices, you got a lot of apartments and cafes and shops and things. And I kind of was reading a lot of Hellblazer, reading a lot of Dresden. Uh,
Sure.
Reading a lot about World of Darkness, and I want to do a game more like that. So it's more urban fantasy in the vein of Dresden or World of Darkness, point and click adventure style, kind of with the Bioware narrative branching kind of thing. So that's where I'm going. That's what I'm making, basically. That's what.
Nice. Cool. So, what challenges do you have with making a game in today's modern environment? So, when you and I started playing games, I'm gonna just assume you and I started playing games at some similar time, or at least within like a 5 year span of each other. Games were kind of the nerdy thing you did that wasn't playing football and being cool, and the environment was looked down on by both business and the entertainment industry. Movies were king, whatever. I'm a filmmaker. I was just in LA 2 weeks ago talking to some producers, and they were more interested in my ties with the video game community than any of my film stuff because where Avatar is famous for making 2 billion in a year, Call of Duty is famous for making 2 billion in a 24-hour period of time, which is a huge, a huge difference, right? So we've elevated that industry from being this sort of like only if you get the shareware booklet full of discs from your office that was sent to them in the mail to gaming is what you do instead of watching movies, or gaming is what you do instead of getting drunk at the party or whatever. Like gamers are everyone. Everyone's
And
gamers.
sometimes both.
And sometimes both. Yeah. How do we develop thoughtful, classically inspired games in an environment where the scrutiny, the press, the aggression from the crowds are so much different. Doom would not have made it today. I do not think Doom released today would have made it. Like if granted, Doom was instrumental in making the environment what it is today. If we were to replace it with some other game and release Doom today, I don't think Doom would have worked. I think it would have been shredded. But Doom was the one at the time. We come from a time where you could make that one game, and it wasn't released along with 10,000 other games on Steam that month. How do you make a relevant and powerful and interesting and financially positive game
Well,
in
since you
today's
said,
environment?
it's like back in the day, like late '80s, or whatever, you got people were making games out of the garage and sending them out, and they could do that and make a small living from it, and they probably would get swallowed up today. But I mean, that history does repeat itself. Like when I first started Wadjet Eye, when I first started selling games, um, it was 2006, and the indie scene was so small. Um, it was so small, like no one was really doing this, and it's very quaint to think about now. But before that, it hadn't been very long that people actually were willing and comfortable with buying stuff online and downloading games online. I mean, it was just like I remember like 1999 or 2000, like 5 years earlier, where the concept of PayPal and giving like having money online It was
Yeah.
weird, an alien concept.
Yeah.
And so it was like, you couldn't have done what I did like a few years earlier than when I did it. And so it was very hard to actually do it back then. And so I think that sort of helped me because I sort of grew as the technology and the industry grew. And I think now it's just so much harder to get noticed because there's so much going on. There's just so much noise. You get so many games being released on Steam every day. Uh,
Yeah.
you get like, so many shows about games, so many Twitter feeds about games, so many websites about games. It's really hard to get noticed. Even me at this point, it's very hard for people to pay attention to me because there's just so much out there every day.
Right.
But I think what's always served me well is that like a good game is a good game, and the cream does rise to the top. You just believe in your stuff. I mean, whenever I tried to gauge the market and make a game that I thought would do well because this is what people seem to like these days, always fail every single time. But when I just made the game I wanted to make, focused on that, and focused on something I personally liked, then it magically did well, or at least it was received a lot better, and it tended to do well because of that, because it has a heart and has a soul to it. Um, so I think that is what is the important thing. A lot of developers see all the success stories and um, they think I can do that too. And so you get a lot of people just trying it and not really, the heart's not there, maybe. It's hard to explain. Like, I think that is the key, is to really put something of yourself
Sure.
in your work.
So honesty, it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah.
Like don't pursue it for game's sake. Pursue it because you have something to say,
Yes.
or because you have a
exactly.
game you need to make, and then make a game. I see this in both the film and
Uh-oh,
game
I think
industry.
you froze.
Oh,
Oh, are
can
we
you
still
see
here?
us?
Now you're back. Hello. I
Okay,
can
cool. We see this both in the game and film industry. People who want to make a movie because they want to make a movie, not because they have a story to tell or because there's something honestly that they need to get out, but because they see people making movies and think it's really cool.
Yeah.
I see that a lot with games as well. We do a lot of conventions and stuff, and we often see, a team of three guys who have the coolest idea for a game. It's basically Zelda, and it's like I wonder why that's the game you're making. I mean, they even say, it's like old school Zelda. But is it? It's old school Zelda plus a bunch all of your storytelling, right? And no, it's basically old school Zelda. And you get this sort of not wannabe. They're not. They're being genuine. They want to be part of a thing that's genuinely interesting to be part of. But I think what your statement is telling me is that there needs to be like an honest need as opposed to an honest desire. Like,
Yes.
like I know that as a storyteller,
That's
I need to
very
tell a
good
story.
point. That's a very,
Uh,
very good point.
Excellent. I need to tell a story, or I'm gonna like go insane. When I was programming for a living, I spent my time writing screenplays. I would work, the 12-hour day, the 18-hour day at crunch time, and I'd go home and for 3 hours I'd write a screenplay because I needed to, not because I wanted to. I wanted to sleep. I wanted to have a nice dinner and go to bed, but I needed to, or it would like kill me. When I gave up that career, it was because I absolutely needed. If I pursued just getting a paycheck and programming for a living for too long, I would just get fatter and fatter and fatter and more depressed and more depressed and more depressed and then die. And that's not life. It wasn't that, oh man, I really want to go do a thing. I really want to be like X director or X game guy. It was that I needed to do this thing. And I agree with you on the idea of honesty. It has to be an honest need rather than to be an honest desire. And not having a desire to do a thing, it doesn't make you a bad person or less honest, but you should try to align your desire with the thing that you need to do.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's like, what kind of was the course correction for me when I was making Blackwells? Um, I first would make a game because I had to,
Right.
because this is how I earn my living. But then, as I as the as I kind of work on it and as the design sort of evolves, I sort of realize what I'm trying to say and why I'm making this game, and it kind of course corrects me. And
Sure.
then I can kind of, that's sort of my second draft. It sort of sometimes takes a while to find that voice, and it's not always easy to find. You can't be forced. It's either there or it's not sometimes.
Sure.
But sometimes you play a game or you read a book or you see a movie and you just know that their heart's just not in it. You can just tell.
Yeah.
and
Yeah, you can feel it.
yeah.
Did you always know that you were going to end up making games?
Well, it's funny, going back to kind of what he said before. I had before I was making games professionally. I did them for fun, and I had a really boring corporate office job in the garment, and I gave that up. I kind of really needed to shake things up, and I gave that up and went to teach English in Korea for a year. Supposed to be for a year. I lasted like 7 months, and I started touring China. I just sort of bummed around China for about 2 months, and I remember thinking it was ridiculous. Like I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and meanwhile I was like designing games in a notebook, and not thinking that could be something I could actually legitimately do. It was
Sure.
this, like sci-fi RPG that was a complete Knights of the Old Republic knockoff. Maybe one day I'll make it. Um, but then I got home and I just started making the Shiva kind of as a way to pretend I had a real job, and it just sort of snowballed from there. I always
Wow.
so I always sort of joke that I was doing it as a way to avoid getting a real job, and I'm still doing that. I just
That's
pray I don't
excellent.
have to get a real job. Yeah, so it's not so much that I always knew that I was going to do it. It was something that I always did, but didn't know that I could do it for my.
That's excellent. Yeah.
Absolutely. It looks like Gimlau had a
Yeah,
question
we have
for you.
we have a few questions from the audience, and then I have four questions, and we'll wrap it up because we've taken a ton of your
It's all
time.
right.
So, from Jim Lau, he says, Dave, what do you think of Murdered Soul Suspect?
I know it's got a similar themes
I've heard of it.
to
People
what
keep
you've
sending
done.
me the screenshots. They're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, what do you think of this? I'm like, uh, yeah, it kind of looks like Joa and Rosie, Rosa and Joey if, they were kind of punked up a bit.
Sure.
It's hardly an original idea.
Sure.
Medium and
Yeah.
Spirit Guide. I haven't played it. I heard it's not very good. So,
Ooh.
Yeah.
I haven't played it myself, but I hear it's not that great.
It
But
seems like an idea that it's a really good idea, and I can see why multiple games would harken on a similar theme. So I'm not surprised that a game like that exists.
yeah,
But if you're gonna choose between two, hopefully people are gonna
wasn't the
go
David
to you.
Cage game also kind of a similar idea, which I
I,
forget what it was called?
I can't remember its title either, but yeah, I know there was at least one more
What?
floating around.
Don't you have some sort of attachment to Murdered Soul Suspect in some
I
way?
have a very bitter
What is your
attachment.
weird, bitter attachment to
personally.
Murdered Soul Suspect?
Actually, I also haven't played the game. I just somewhere along the lines of that game, I'm owed about $1,000 in monies.
Why?
Uh,
Is this
it's
something you could
so
talk about?
it's so tenuous. A company that I was freelancing for did an interview series for some extra content for, I think it's Square Enix that put that out. And went to the offices and anyways, I edited a bunch of the content and was never paid out of that. So
Ooh.
I know a bunch
So you
about the
hate
game.
that game? Screw that game.
No, I'm sure the game is just fine. It's not the game's fault. But I get a little like, I know a little bit about the game and I'm like, oh, I'm very loosely connected to that. So
Meansver says, what do you look for in a game that you're going to publish? As a publisher, I don't think as a creator, but as a publisher.
Um, kind of a moot point now because I'm kind of backing away. I'm kind of phasing out publishing. Um,
Well, that ruins the next question. No, I'm just
well,
kidding.
you combined with another, or not combined, but you've got a partnership with another company, right?
I hired a full-time developer, mostly because like um, I this is sort of this sounds weird, but it's like I don't really have to publish anymore. It's more like I want. How do I explain this? Originally, I published because I wanted more games in our library, on our store. So I would publish others while working on my own stuff. And that kind of hasn't happened. I found that when I publish something, I can't just slap my label on it and sell it. I need to
Right.
be involved because I'm kind of very conscious of this sounds so pretentious, but I'm very conscious of our brand. And I would never be so hubristic to say that I know what makes a game good, but I've done enough of these things that I kind of know what makes one bad. Like we've
Right.
made
Sure.
mistakes in the past. We know we've done things that people don't like, haven't been critically received very well. And so I can kind of see that happening with a game we're publishing and can kind of head that off. And also, I found that when I'm publishing someone, they're usually a new developer, which means I kind of got to go through that process again and again. And we can't really grow and learn. And so what I decided to do was if I'm going to do that, I'd rather have someone on staff as a designer who will continually learn and get better. So
Sure.
continually learn and get better as a company. Like I hired a full-time artist he did Blackwell Epiphany, he did the remake of the Shiva, he did Techno Babylon, and he's getting progressively better. He keeps learning, and we're
Right.
totally reaping the benefits of that. It's wonderful. So that's kind of why I'm doing that, and it's kind of esoteric and weird. Doesn't answer your question, but that's basically why we're not publishing anymore. And some of our
Sure.
Sure.
best games have been games we published, and I'm so glad they're there, and I'm so glad we got them out, and I'm so glad they're part of our store. But I need to be honest with myself that I'm kind of starving as a creative person myself, and I want to work on my own stuff again, and it's hard to do that while publishing other.
So it falls back to again the honesty problem. The like you're not. It would be really cool if you were like super empty and hollow and could just stamp a thing and put it out to like leverage your brand and make some money. But the truth is, when you see that thing come in, you have to care for it. You have to treat it well, and you have to
That's just it. I
give
can't
it the effort.
do that because it's like if it's if it's a flawed game, or if it's like if I know it has flaws in it, or if I know that there's something in the game that shouldn't be there, or I know it's not going to be received well, or whatever, and I don't want that. I don't want to sell it.
Sure.
So I will ask the developer to change it. I'll give suggestions, that kind of thing. Sometimes, half the time they're totally cool with it. Sometimes they're not, and there's conflict and that kind of thing. So I prefer to have stuff that's all done in house now, which
Right.
is of course, I could change my mind in a year. If someone
Yeah.
approaches me with a project that is absolutely amazing and I gotta have it, then I could change my mind. Fine. Uh, but you never know. So yeah, that's kind of where my thoughts are on it.
All right. So I have four questions for you. They're my questions. The first is, what was the worst thing ever to happen in your gaming career, your game development career? What's the lowest point? What's the explosion? What's the time where everything fell apart?
Okay, I would say, um, okay, there was 2010. A number of things happened. We released a game that did not do very well. I mean, it did okay, but it did not earn back like the money we spent on it in a long by a long shot. We were doing a second game for Play First. We did Emerald City Confidential with them. We were doing another game with them. That got canceled. It just wasn't working out. That got canceled. And so like we were kind of working on like I was kind of trying to work on Blackwell Deception because I'm like, all right, this is what'll earn us money. I got to get a game out. Uh, and I deliberately dialed back on the budget, which is kind of obvious when you look at the game. We were doing, like Janet was doing, my wife was doing freelance work. We were like doing some design work for other companies. So we were kind of not sure that we'd be able to last the year. But then things worked out. Um, we got Gemini Rue, which ended up doing really, really well.
Yeah, being incredible.
Ended up doing Blackwell Deception, which was like at that time our biggest money earner. We started getting on Steam the following year. So that was like our worst time. 2010 was probably late 2010, early 2011 was probably our worst time financially. But then things started to get progressively better after that.
So my follow up question to that is, what's the best moment so far in your
Oh,
game
I
dev career?
probably, I mean, for sure, the end of 2011. Did I say 2001 before? 2011. Um, because we started, first of all, we got on, we had two good sellers out. We had Gemini Rue and Blackwell Deception. We were part of the first Indie Royale bundle with Gemini Rue, and we got Gemini Rue on Steam. We got the first, we got all three Blackwell games on Steam, and then we were in the holiday sale, and then got Blackwell Deception on Steam like the next month or two. So it was like so much money was coming in, like in such a short amount of time. It was amazing. And then 2012, we had like our two biggest hits like in a while. We had two really not our biggest hits, but our two really strong hits in one year, which was fantastic. We had Resonance and Primordia came out that year, and so that was like 2000 late 2011 to the end of 2012 was like our best time financially. And then of course we had a kid, so then that was that.
All right. So last two questions, and then we're gonna let you go. What is your favorite, just general overall, not necessarily the experience of developing the thing, but just your looking back at your catalog of games that you've developed, not necessarily games you've published. What is your favorite?
Let's see.
What is your favorite child of the children that you've reared digitally? Which one would you not let die in the fire if you could only pick one?
I mean, I would say Blackwell Epiphany, if only because it's the first Blackwell game that I felt really matched the vision in my head. I was making the games for 8 years, and like when I first started, I didn't really have the experience or the clout to really make it the way I wanted to. For some reason, people thought that like they looked at Blackwell Legacy and they're like, oh, it's like some, supernatural Scooby-Doo thing for teenage girls. And I'm like, no, that's not what it is. It's this dark urban fantasy. Shut up. And that's like, I just didn't have the money or the budget or like the experience to really make it the way I wanted to make it. And Blackwell Epiphany was like exactly what I wanted in my head. So I'm very, very proud of that one. That's the one I would save if I had to save one.
So on the opposite side of that, which one is the one that you would like throw into the fire?
I mean, in terms of the stuff I've made,
Yeah.
what would I throw?
You have to pick one. Obviously, you've made no misses.
The very first Blackwell game, because it's where all I can see are the flaws. It was like I made so many mistakes with that game, and people tell me they love it, and I don't begrudge them for loving it. But I look at it and it's just like I'm really glad people could see past the flaws and play the rest of the games, because all I can see are all the mistakes I made. And that's going to happen no matter what, because you make something, you learn and you gain experience while making it. So obviously, you can do better now. And this is like a decade later. I look at Legacy and I'm like, oh God, what the hell was I thinking? So yeah, that would go in a fire.
Nice. Okay. So I guess finally there's one more question. I guess I've invented a question during this. What do you say to anybody who wants? This is your standard question that everybody always asks, and I'm sorry that I have to ask it. What do you say to any young wannabe game makers and developers who want to get into the industry? General stupid question that everybody asks. What are your words of encouragement / words of warning? Your general, we want to do this. How do you do it?
I say the barrier to entry has never been lower. I mean, it's so easy to make a game now, or at least to get it out there. I guess some words of encouragement. Like I said, there's nothing stopping you. I mean, when I first started, it was so hard to get a game up and out. And I think of how easy it is now, even just to get on Steam. It's so easy. There's nothing stopping you. Word of warning, that means there's nothing stopping anyone else. It is a lot harder to get noticed.
Sure.
I will say that your first game will probably fail in some ways. You will make mistakes. Learn from them, and don't put yourself in a position where you can't recover from those mistakes. That's important. Don't bet the farm on a first project that might not work out, and then you're left with nothing. Don't put yourself in that position.
Sure. Fair. Well, thank you very much for being on Starr Mazer TV, Dave. It's been really cool hanging out with you, and we will, of course, hang out more outside of the context of being on a show. Viewers, thank you for watching Dave Gilbert on Starr Mazer TV. Go check out all of his games. We'll dump a bunch of links in the chat in a few minutes. It'll be really incredible.
Questions, you can hit me up on Twitter if you want to.
Yeah, he's super active on the Twitters, so follow him up there. I'm sure one of our mods, will throw his Twitter hashtag up there, or his Twitter handle, rather, up there.
Here we go.
Oh, he's going to do it right now. There you go.
Bam.
Beautiful. So,
Nice.
there. Thank you very much. Go check out Wadjet Eye Games. If you guys haven't played the Blackwell series, play it. If you guys haven't played Primordia, play it. If you guys haven't played any of his games, go play them. They're really cool. I'm going to shut this down. We are